Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the June 2025 edition of the Southeast Monthly Climate Webinar. This is Elliot Wickham with NOAA's NITIS, the Southeast DEWS Coordinator. Today's presentation, we're going to have David Zierden from the Florida Climate Center give the climate overview, Shelby Saxon from the Southeast River Forecast Center with the water resources overview, Pam Knox at the University of Georgia give the agricultural impacts update, and then our special topics presentation today will be the 2025 Atlantic Hurricane Outlook given by Christopher Lancy at NOAA's National Hurricane Center. So I will go ahead and kick it off to Dave.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Elliot. If we can go ahead to next, we'll get started by looking at temperature departures over the last 30 days. And I have that plotted station by station over on the left. These are departures from normal for daily maximum temperature. That's where this signal really showed up. So these are for the daily high temperatures. And you see across much of Alabama and Georgia and even into North Carolina, uh, temperatures, daily highs were running up to 3 degrees below normal, which is very usual for recent times. Uh, the primary cause is all the rain and cloudiness that we've experienced recently,
recently
had kept temperatures
kept
down.
temperatures down.
Go ahead, Dave. Sorry, we got some feedback there, but I think I handled it. So feel free to put your mic back on.
Okay, I thought it might be coming from me. Okay, like I was saying, most of Alabama, Georgia, even into North Carolina, running several degrees cooler than normal for daily high temperatures. Where Florida continues to see a recent trend of warm summers. Here we see temperature departures of 3 to 4 degrees. And when you're talking about daily high temperatures in the low 90s, that's very significant. So, kind of a tale of two regions in the Southeast. Over in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and the British Virgin Islands, temperatures are about as close to normal as you can get. So, really, no news there. So, we'll go to the next slide and start looking at precipitation. And this is the same type graph or map over on the left-hand side. This is for the last 30 days, precipitation departures from normal. And I'm sorry, it's kind of busy, but what we see is over in eastern Mississippi and central Alabama, departures from normal of 6 to up to 10 inches above normal just over the last 30 days. As we get into the Carolinas up to Virginia, we're generally running above normal. Some stations are an exemption, the Appalachians. We also see heavy rainfall anomalies along the Carolinas coast and also southwest Florida, where Naples, Florida is running about 5 inches above normal. Uh, the exception to this is the east coast of Florida, where we've been under predominantly easterly flow, really suppressing the afternoon sea breeze type convection on the east side of the state. And I'll show you more of that in a little bit. In Puerto Rico and the British Virgin Islands, they've been very dry the past 30 days, uh, generally running the 1.5 to even 2.73 inches below normal over the last 30 days. So go to the next one. And I want to talk about a weather event that happened recently. That's the West Virginia flash flood. Uh, really affected the area of Wheeling, West Virginia on June 14th. They received 7 to 8 inches of rainfall in just 2 hours, and most of it actually came in a 30-minute period. So in the rivers and streams, it created a wall of water that just washed all the cars, houses, anything in its way away. And unfortunately, there were 8 confirmed deaths from this flash flooding event. And here are some pictures I've taken from CBS News that shows the devastation. But we'll switch back gears and go to the next slide. And now I'd like to look at temperature and rainfall as historical rankings. And over on the left, we see the historical rankings for temperature over the last 30 days. And again, you see Florida really sticks out. Many stations in the dark red as being top 5 historically. In the orange is top 10 historically. That extends up into South Georgia and even southern Mississippi. And also the coastal Carolinas are all running well above normal and ranking very high historically. If we look back further over the past 60 days, it really tells the story. Now you see cities like Tampa, Jacksonville, Daytona Beach, Melbourne, Florida, have all experienced their warmest such 60-day period on record. And that even extends up into southern Georgia, Valdosta, even southern Mississippi. Lots of top 5 up the east coast of the United States. I'm a little suspicious of that #1 ranking for Raleigh, North Carolina. It seems kind of inconsistent with the surrounding stations, but I'd like to check closer on that. Puerto Rico and the British Virgin Islands, nothing really remarkable there, ranking near the middle of their historic record. So the next slide, we'll take a look at precipitation rankings. And here's where you really see that heavy precipitation that affected eastern Mississippi and northern Alabama, the Birmingham area. In the dark green, every one of those stations ranked in the top 5 as far as wettest 30-day period during this time of year. Some other outliers, Naples, Florida is the outlier for Florida, ranking 2nd over the last 30 days. And you see a lot of top 10s and even top 5s up in the coastal Carolinas. Again, British Virgin Islands, nothing really remarkable there, close to the historical median. But over on the right-hand side is the same 30-day period. These are radar estimates of rainfall totals. And everywhere you see that pink and purple, that's monthly rainfall totals of 10 to 15 inches or even more. And you really see that central Alabama, eastern Mississippi area, southwest Florida's gotten abundant rainfall over the past 30 days, and spots of the coastal Carolinas. So we'll go to the next slide. And with all this rainfall, we've seen great improvement in the U.S. drought monitor for the Southeast region. Over on the right-hand side is the current U.S. drought monitor. And we see no cholera at all in any of the states except Florida, not even areas of yellow or abnormally dry, which is not considered drought. In Florida, things are improving slowly. We do have some long-term deficits that accumulated all during the winter dry season, but I hope we see some further improvement in the map this week. So we'll go to the next slide, and let's talk a little bit about severe weather. Over on the left is counts of U.S. tornado reports for the year. And the graphs show every year since 2010. And you see that red line is where we are this year so far. We're running, looks like, second most active tornado year since 2010 this year. So it's been a very active year. Over on the right is just month to date, or during the month of June, storm reports from the Storm Prediction Center. And there's a few reports of tornadoes, northern Mississippi, Tennessee, Escambia County, and Venice in Florida with some short-lived weak tornadoes. But what really sticks out is the cluster of high wind reports from northern Mississippi through northern Alabama, northern Georgia, up into the Carolinas. A complex of severe storms on June 7th raced across the whole area, leading to hundreds of high wind reports. And if you see the dark blue squares, that's where there were actually measured winds of over 75 miles per hour. So not necessarily tornadoes this month, but very active. We'll go to the next slide now. Talk about, it is waterspout season for the state of Florida and other coastal areas. And over on the left, this was taken Sunday near Bradenton, off the shores of Anna Maria Island. There's a spectacular photo of 2 twin waterspouts. Uh, Over on the right is one I captured myself in Apalachicola last week. It doesn't look so impressive, but there was a circulation on the water surface, even though the funnel wasn't entirely visible. So while I'm on this slide, I'd like to mention, I don't have a slide for it, but the threat of lightning. In the past week, there have been 8 people injured and even 1 death from lightning strikes. And pretty alarming. The one death was a 29-year-old man on his honeymoon in New Smyrna. And also another commonality is all these occurred either on the beach or a golf course. So 2 of the most vulnerable places, that's where they happened. We'll go to the next slide. Let's start taking a look at the Pacific Ocean and what we can expect down the road. We are firmly in the neutral phase right now, as you see on the left-hand bar graph. Through the end of summer, June, July, August, over an 80% chance of remaining in the neutral phase. As we get into the fall and winter, the chances of returning to La Niña increase, but they're really not above the climatological average. So not a real strong forecast here. Neutral is still most likely throughout the winter and even into next spring. And over on the right is just the model plume of all the different ocean models that forecast temperatures in that Niño 3.4 region. And you see the ensemble mean is very close to 0. There is a bit of a spread, but some of those models are obviously outliers. So neutral seems like a good bet. Also, there's very little chance of El Nino developing over this entire forecast cycle of 12 to 13 months. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. This I won't spend any time on because we have Christopher Lancy here to really go into depth, but the 2025 Atlanta hurricane season outlook is for above normal activity, but not nearly as high as last year's forecast. So with that, we'll go on to the next slide and start looking at our seasonal forecast. And here are the seasonal temperature and rainfall outlooks for July, August, and September. Over on the left, the temperature outlook, the entire contiguous United States is shaded as increased chances of above normal temperature, which is very consistent with just recent trends over the last 10 to 15 years. A little stronger chance in southern Florida. On the right, this is interesting. They've been very consistent with their forecast for increased chances of above normal rainfall for the southeast region. And so far, that has played out over the last month or more. And so this forecast still holds for the rest of the summer. We'll go to the next slide. The Caribbean outlook. This is from the National Multi-Model Ensemble. For temperature on the left, you see a little warmer than normal over most of the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, but nothing exceptional. Not a real strong signal for Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands. On the right is the rainfall forecast for July through September. And this looks like a pretty strong forecast for the Caribbean to be drier than normal. So we'll keep an eye on that and how that plays out and how that might even affect temperatures. So the next slide, I'll just show the seasonal drought outlook, which doesn't have a lot of information since there's no drought most places in the southeast. They really don't have a lot to say. For the state of Florida, since we are in the midst of our summer rainy season, they do show that drought removal is likely. So that's good news. So we'll go to the next slide and start looking at shorter term outlooks. This 6 to 10 day outlook from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. And the main feature on the temperature outlook is that really strong forecast for above normal temperatures over North Carolina, Virginia, the Washington, D.C. area. We are in the midst of a heat wave now. A vast majority of the area east of the Mississippi River is either under a heat advisory or heat warning today from the National Weather Service. So it's a fairly significant event and looks to continue for the near term future. And the precipitation outlook, once again, favors above normal rainfall for most of the region, except for extreme South Florida. Next slide, we'll look a little further out, the 8 to 14 day or week 2 outlook. We see that the heat wave or heat dome starts to break down over Virginia and the Carolinas, but Florida remains at a high risk of above normal temperatures. Precipitation outlook, broken record, it still calls for a good, decent chance of above normal precipitation in week 2. So with that, I think it's my summary slide that I won't go through, and I'll just turn it over to Shelby Saxon for the water resources overview.
Thanks, David. All right, so we can go to my first graphic slide. And so we'll start off looking at the runoff graphic on the right. And we can see that the region is observing runoff that is above normal. And so that's due to those successive days of rainfall that we've been experiencing and pretty good amounts in accumulation. As David mentioned, a lot of the area is above normal in rainfall for the last 30 days. And so transitioning from that below normal runoff that we saw in early May to the above normal now is benefiting the streams across the region. So the streams are at a point where we're receiving water with every rainfall event. And so across the area, we see at least normal flows. And if we focus on the graphic on the left side, we actually see in Mississippi and Alabama where those anomalies were pretty great in David's precipitation analysis that there are actually some rivers and streams that are in the high flows for this 28-day period. And I think in South Georgia, a few of those kind of peak out as well. But it is a little different in North Carolina where rainfall has tended to come in high accumulations at one time rather than moderate amounts over a longer span of time. And also it's been different amounts depending on if you're in the mountain regions versus on the coast. And so in North Carolina, we are still seeing some streams that are below normal, but majority of the area is at normal flows. In Florida, the rainfall season has seemed to begin down there, and so we can still stay on this previous one. Thank you. And so we will take a look at that runoff on the next slide in a moment, but the streams there have not quite started seeing rainfall or seeing the water reaching them from each rainfall event. And so looking at the differences on the Gulf side of the peninsula and on the Atlantic side, we can see where rain actually may have been the most beneficial. And so in the area from Tampa to Naples, it's been pretty wet over the last 28 days. And so a lot of the streams have been at above normal in that area. But then if we look on the Atlantic side, it's a little bit different. Rain hasn't been making its way across the peninsula or coming off the Atlantic as often. And so in the area between Jacksonville and South, we're seeing some of those streams that are below normal. And so those ones do drain into the Indian River, the St. Lucie River, and St. John's River. And so we're still looking for those to keep receiving rainfall. And we can go to the next slide where we'll look at how the runoff is in each state. And so starting with Alabama, where we just saw that the streams are above and much above normal flows, the runoff there has been steadily holding at the much above normal for the past month or so in that area. And but going over to Georgia, where it has been consistent in receiving rainfall and our stream flows are normal to much above normal, that area is only in about the above normal percentile classes for runoff. And so we're looking at about the 75, 76 percentiles for the current time of the year. But that is a strong contrast to where we were last year at this time. And so that's really great for the rivers in this area to be plentiful for going into the long, hot summertime. We did discuss a bit about Florida, but the stream flows there are rebounding, as you can see in the runoff, starting to have a kind of positive increasing trend there. And so we'll look towards the rest of their rainfall season to hopefully continue in that positive trend in the runoff and increasing the stream flows there. And on the next slide, we have our South Carolina runoff. And so streams in that state are mostly normal for the past month, and the runoff has peaked at above normal for the month. And so that's showing the benefits of that rain that we've been receiving in the last month or two. So that sharp jump from rain in May, and then we've just been holding steady throughout the month of June. In North Carolina and Virginia, as we mentioned, the rainfall has been kind of inconsistent or coming at various periods and amounts. And so runoff there in both states has just kind of hung out in that above normal area. But it, again, as everywhere else, has rebounded from what we saw in the early parts of the year where we were dropping into the below normal categories. And on the next slide, we have our current river conditions within the Southeast RFC boundaries. We're seeing a few bankful conditions in parts of South Alabama, Southeast Georgia, and only one point down in Milton, Florida, in the Panhandle. And so most of these flows have crested or are currently cresting, and so we don't expect any flooding or additional flooding from the rains that cause these. And so speaking of flooding, on the next slide, we'll take a look at where we are in our stream flow climatology. And so these are updated graphics. If you notice and have been following along with us, we have now included 2020 through 2024 in this. And so we're in week 26, and we're seeing that this is a low point in our stream flow climatology. So it's not abnormal that we're only seeing, bankful conditions this week. And as we get later into the summer, maybe in about 5 weeks or so, those chances for flooding do increase. Most of those would come from the increase in tropical development. And so we'll just wait to see what our pattern looks like and how the tropics are behaving later in the summer. The next slide specifically is our South Florida group. And so, as we said, Florida has its own rainfall season. And so the yellow shaded area in the map on the right shows what this area is highlighting. And so we do see that minor river flooding is common during this time, but similar to the rest of the Southeast, the chances for flooding are later in the summer period. And so we're just glad to see that in Florida, the rainfall season has started, and some of that drought is starting to decrease. And so I believe the next slide is my risk for flooding. And so we're going with normal risk for river flooding in the July through September timeframe. Although things are looking like we'll be wet, it will also be pretty hot. And so only chances for flooding will really come with really heavy pop-up thunderstorms or tropical activity during this period. So we can go to my summary, and I'll let you all read that as you have time, and I will now hand it off to Pam.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Shelby, and good morning, everybody. I hope you're all enjoying all the local fruits and vegetables that are being grown. I'm going out to pick blueberries this coming weekend. Let's jump right in with my next slide. And we're going to talk about some of the impacts of the recent conditions on agriculture. Almost all the cotton and peanuts by now have been planted. Cotton is starting to square, and about 10% of the peanuts are pegging. The only area where they really had trouble is in Alabama, where David showed you how wet it's been there. Some of the stands are quite poor, and farmers are thinking about whether or not they have to try to replant something. Just because if you don't have a good stand, you're not going to make very good yield. So that is generally mostly a problem in Alabama. Other parts have not gotten quite as much rain as David showed. Winter wheat harvest is ahead of schedule. Pasture conditions are generally good. I mean, the rain's been great for a lot of agricultural products. And in spite of the rains, it's very spotty rain so that they can work most of the day, and then the storms come in sometimes in the afternoon, give them some rain, but it doesn't last all day. So they've been able to work for most of the day through that. Vegetable crops are generally doing well. The only thing is the heat and humidity has caused an increase in fungal diseases, and so farmers are having to treat for that using fungicides. And they really have to keep on top of that because with the rain, you have to treat it frequently just to keep the plants covered. I also wanted to note, last week I posted a link to the USDA crop progress reports, and they have changed how they do that. They're now no longer doing state or regional reports. They're just doing the national report. So the link is here if you want to go. This one happens to be month 6, so that would be for June. So you can go and get updates for crop conditions. Unfortunately, the Southeast doesn't necessarily fall into the top 5 or top 10 in a lot of the crops like corn. So it's a little harder to find the data, but there are some ways to get at it. So if we go on the next slide, here's our soil temperature on the left, soil moisture on the right, and it's not surprising. Soil temperatures are running a bit higher than normal because of all the heat we've had and the sunshine. It will get hotter in the next week as we go into this really hot spell. Soil moisture showing the wet conditions, especially in Alabama and northern parts of Georgia, but along the coast in North Carolina and South Carolina and Virginia as well. And you can still see the lingering dry conditions down in Florida. Not a big surprise, very consistent with the temperature and precipitation maps. So if we go on, here's a look at the growing degree days for the last 30 days. This is base 50. You can go to the website there and pick other bases. And it shows the last 30 days has been well above normal for most of the region, with the exception of Florida and that little corner of southeast Georgia, where they've had more rain and somewhat cooler temperatures. So everything is growing like crazy. They're ahead of usual just because they've had a lot of heat put into the system and a lot of sunshine as well. And you can see if you look at the graph on the right-hand side there, that considering that we have been consistently accumulating degree days over time, we do expect the season for the total is going to increase. That'll be interesting to see how it affects harvest dates and how that falls within the tropical peak season. So that's something we're kind of watching. Obviously too early to say anything about that, but definitely something to keep in mind if you're growing crops. You want to keep on top of this. On the next slide, I've got, there's still some continuing impacts of Hurricane Helene that are showing up, especially with fruit and nut crops, because it has destroyed a number of trees, especially for pecans. The count of the number of trees has gone down considerably because there were so many lost to Hurricane Helene. So obviously, that's going to reduce the yield for a number of years. Blueberry yields have also, where they have the bushes, the yields have been good. The one that's just down the street from where I live is just loaded with berries. But obviously, if they don't have bushes, then they're not able to really get much yield out of that. And so that has been an issue for some production as well. Wet conditions have led to some fungal diseases on all the plants, especially the one on the left there. Picture is showing pecan trees. There's various kinds that are doing it. It isn't necessarily going to affect the yield that much because it does have some impact on the nut production, but often the trees will shake off some of the nuts so that they maximize the production of nut meats in the nuts that are left. It is better than expected so far. We'll just have to keep an eye on that and hope that we don't have any more tropical storms that come through and knock the nuts down this year. So if we go on, here's my summary, and I'll let you look at that later. Overall, I think we're looking about as good as can be expected, considering I was worried we might be going into a drought this year after a La Niña winter, but that has not been the case this year. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Chris Lancey, who is the chief of the Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch at NOAA's National Hurricane Center, and I will leave it up to you, Chris. Uh-oh, I'm not hearing you. Hope we didn't lose you.
Hey, this is Chris Lancey.
All right, good. Now we can
Sorry
hear you.
about that. This is I'm not Pam Knox, but I'm happy to help out here. So can you see my slides?
Not yet. I just turned the screen off, so let's see if we can get
Okay.
those up for you.
All right. Let's see our back. Yeah, if you can make me presenter, I'll share my slides.
See if that worked.
Yeah. All right. Can you see them now?
We see kind of the mirror dimension from Doctor Strange. Oh, they're up in. Perfect. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity to chat today. I am not Matt Rosenkrantz. Matt is the lead for the Seasonal Atlantic Hurricane Outlook. He's not available today. I'm on the Seasonal Outlook team, and which is a combined effort from the Climate Prediction Center, which takes the lead, the National Hurricane Center, as well as the Hurricane Research Division, part of NOAA Research. So I'm going to go over this. I'm going to talk about a little on the climatology, some of the details about the forecast, how it can be used, and then I'm going to end up with some of what's new from the National Hurricane Center for this year. So let's start with climatology and when we're issuing these forecasts. So these flame-like looking graphics show on the yellow when we get hurricane activity, and the red shows when we have tropical storms. And you can see June 1st is when we can start typically having tropical storms. But it's really not until early August or late July when we have hurricane activity. And so we issue these outlooks twice a year for the Atlantic, one in late May, really before we get much substantial activity. And then once again in early August when the activity really starts ramping up. We also do an outlook for the East Pacific and the Central Pacific and the West Pacific as well. We're going to focus on the Atlantic because where you all are focused in the Southeast United States. So climatology, even though we have a 6-month hurricane season, they're really not all the same. And so these colors show where you get tropical storms and hurricanes forming and occurring from July on the top left to August, September, and October. These 4 months are really the biggies. So June and November, you can have tropical storms. Rarely you can get hurricanes, but 90% of major hurricanes occur just in August, September, and October. And so they're more numerous. They extend spatially further abroad, as well as stronger systems. So it is a 6-month season, but you really got to pay most attention to August, September, and October for impacts. So a little more on the climatology. When we look specifically at U.S. hurricanes and how often they make landfall, it really varies tremendously across the Gulf of America and the Atlantic coastline. So in red, it shows the shortest return periods, that is the most frequent that we get hurricane impacts. And so you have Southeast Louisiana with a return period of 7 years. So that means on average, you'll have a direct hurricane impact once every 7 years. Doesn't mean it's going to happen every 7 years. You could have it 2 or 3 times in a year, like we had in 2020. But on average, you get a hurricane impact once every 7 years. There's two other hot spots. Southeast Florida has a return period of about once every 6 years, and North Carolina a return period of 5 to 6 years. So other areas that can get hit that are less frequent: South Texas, the Big Bend area of Florida, and Northeast Florida have return periods that are about double of what they are in those hot spots. Regardless of that, everyone is at risk every single hurricane season. We can't tell anybody you're off the hook. You got to be ready every year. So here's the forecast that we have, and I'm going to go into some of the meteorological details about what goes into that. So the Atlantic season this year, 60% chance of it being active, 30% of being near normal, and 10% chance of it being quiet. So we don't give an exact forecast because we're not that good. We have to, there's a lot of uncertainties that go into this. And so we provide probabilistic information as well as a range. And the range we're going is 13 to 19 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, and 3 to 5. You compare that versus the last 3-decade worth of averages, which is 14 named storms, of those 7 becoming hurricanes, of those 3 reaching major hurricane. So the ranges, if we look at hurricanes, span from near average to really busy. Thus far, we've only had one tropical storm that we just named a few minutes ago, Tropical Storm Andrea out in the Central Atlantic. So this is how the 2025 forecast compares to what was predicted last year and what occurred. Last year, we were really confident that it was going to be a busy year, where we said an 85% chance of active and only 5% chance of quiet. And it was really busy. You can see we had 11 hurricanes and the average is 7. So while we're calling for near average to busy, it's still a lot less activity overall than was predicted and what occurred last year. So a little bit on the physics on this. So what we're looking is both remote influences on the main development region, as well as in situ changes that we're looking at the ocean and atmospheric conditions. So the remote is a thing called El Niño Southern Oscillation. When we have an El Niño, it tends to cause more wind shear, tearing apart storms. When we're in La Niña, the opposite, which is cold water off of Ecuador and Peru, it causes less wind shear to tear apart storms. And the area we really focus on is south of about my house, so near about 26 north latitude. And so in this main development region from Africa all the way to the Caribbean, this really determines how busy an overall hurricane season is going to be. And so we look at a few environmental factors. We look at the sea surface temperature. We look at the sea level pressures. We look at the strength of the trade winds that are blowing across the ocean. And we look at the upper level winds that influence that vertical shear. And so overall, we're expecting kind of a neutral ENSO, or not El Nino, not La Nina. So that's not a big factor this year. We don't anticipate. And so it's more the local factors that predominate. And so we do anticipate warm waters in that peak of the season, August, September, October, and below normal wind shear, so less winds tearing apart storms. And part of that is weaker trade winds and weaker upper level westerlies. All tied into the West African monsoon. When we have these same conditions, we also have a wetter area in the Sahel region of West Africa. So when we look at how this forecast is in context with other years, we can see that this shows overall activity in a measure called accumulated cyclone energy, or ACE. And that's a combination of how many, how long they lasted, and how strong they were. And so it's a better metric than just counting the number of named storms. And when you look at this, the blue bars indicate how active it was for a particular season. And from 1995 onward, most years have been very busy. From 1970 94, most years were very quiet. Before 1970, it was a lot busier, but these are a little more incomplete because we didn't have satellite imagery before 1970, and the aircraft reconnaissance couldn't fly all the way across the Atlantic. So it's probably low biased in the 1950s and 60s there. So the forecast we have for this year is from 95% all the way to 180%. So this orange shows where it is the quiet. So below that would be quiet. We don't anticipate to be a quiet year. From the orange to the black shows near average. So we could have a near average year. And above black is an active year. And above red is hyperactive, where it's extremely busy. And so we anticipate anywhere from near average to active to hyperactive. I know that's a big range, and it reflects the uncertainty. We just can't pin it down any more certainty than that. So let's look at a little of the physics, a little more in depth about what leads us to this. And we use both diagnostic of what's going on now as well as some climate models to help predict what those environmental factors are going to be. So we look right now at what the sea surface temperatures are, or at least what they were when we issued the forecast about a month ago. So the April sea surface temperature anomalies, this is how warmer or cooler it is compared to normal conditions, got a couple factors. So that first is that El Niño, La Niña area is in that neutral phase. So it's a little bit of blue, a little bit of yellow, so near average overall. When we look at that main development region in the Atlantic and Caribbean, it is a little warmer. It's cooler than last year, thank goodness, but still a bit warm on the average of about a ½ degree Celsius to a ¼ degree Celsius. So that's about a half to 1 degree Fahrenheit warmer than normal. Further north, the waters are a lot warmer, but usually that doesn't play as much a role in the formation and intensification of storms. So the sea surface temperatures have an annual cycle that we care about. So if you look all the way from the tropics up to all the way to Canada, and from near Africa to the Caribbean, you can see that the black line shows how the annual temperatures change month by month. And blue shows where we're at now, and red shows kind of the very, very warm conditions that occurred last year. And so where we're at now is just a little warmer than average conditions from the 1991 to 2020 average. Substantially cooler than what it was last year. We're actually about a degree cooler in this huge area than we were last hurricane season. So that's good news because that would suggest this single factor that would be less busy than last year. So let's look a little bit more about this El Niño, La Niña phenomenon, or the El Niño Southern Oscillation status. And so on the upper left, it shows the sea surface temperature anomalies over the last month. And right along the equator is where you get the biggest signal for El Niño, La Niña. A little bit of cooling, but not enough to call it a La Niña. When you get a substantial El Niño or La Niña, you get impacts on the convection. And so one way we measure that is with the outgoing long wave radiation, or OLR. And that's pretty patchy. So it's not, if it was an El Niño, for example, we'd see a lot of blue here, a lot of enhanced convection, and it's not there. Likewise, we'd see changes in the winds near the equator for the Pacific. And so we have weak easterlies at the near surface, and the upper levels really no signal at all. And so the wind signature and the convection signature not showing El Niño or La Niña, much more neutral. On the right side, it shows time series for the various ways we measure the El Niño, La Niña. The one we prefer is what's called Niño 3.4, which goes from 120 to 170 west, straddling the equator. And it did get a little cooler than normal during the winter, but in the last few months that has faded to near neutral conditions. So not El Niño, not La Niña, what you could call La Nada, the nothing. So the forecast issued by the Climate Prediction Center, again, it's a probabilistic approach. And we want to know what's going to happen August, September, and October, because that's the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season. You can see chance for El Nino is very small, about a 10%. Chance for La Nina is a little higher, about a 30% chance. But the best guess, about a 54% chance, is neutral conditions during the peak of the hurricane season. So again, we don't think that the El Nino Southern Oscillation phenomenon is going to be a big player this year. So again, we're going to look at more local conditions. So let's look at the environmental factors that have been going on as the lead up to the seasonal prediction. So on the left side, it shows 850 millibar winds. So this is near ocean winds. And this is the anomaly. So it's the deviation from average. And so all year long, you have trade winds that blow from east to west over the Atlantic and Caribbean. And what this shows is some anomalous westerlies, so weaker than normal trades. And so that shows that the pressures are a little bit lower over the area to cause that, as well as less wind shear. On the right side, it shows kind of the upper level conditions and whether or not you're getting enhanced convection and an upper level divergence or convergence. And at least as of late April, early May, we had a little bit more upper level convergence or sinking going on in the upper levels. And so this by itself would suggest not an active season. We think that's going to change a bit, but at least right now, it's been anomalously convergent and dry. We look over the forecast. So this is the prediction for rainfall for West Africa. The area that most relates to hurricane activity is the Sahel, which goes between 10 north and 20 north over West Africa. And the prediction from one of the global models, climate models, is that the Sahel would be a little wetter than normal and the Gulf of Guinea would be a little drier. And so this prediction is consistent with us having a forecast of a busy hurricane season. Let's look at the wind shear. And this is really a big factor. Sea surface temperatures are likely to be warm. They almost always are warm during the peak of the hurricane season. And so many times it's the wind shear that helps determine how busy or quiet a season is going to be. So we've got two different climate models that we use for predicting August, September, and October. The left one shows the climate forecast system, or the CFS. And if it's blue, it's less shear. If it's orange, it's more shear. And you can see in that main development region, that key area, it's mixed. So right now, the forecast is, at least from this particular model, kind of suggesting neutral. Whereas the North American multi-model ensemble is a little more conducive for storms to form because it really shows more reduction of wind shear, so less destructive winds to allow tropical storms and hurricanes to form. So key takeaway overall, we most likely expecting an above normal season, but we would not be surprised if it was near average. It would be a shock if it was quiet. So again, these seasonal forecasts, they are a bit limited in what they can do. We can't say where storms are going to hit. So whether you're in Mississippi or North Carolina or Florida, you have to get ready every year. So the seasonal forecast gets a lot of attention, but really you can't use it for much decision making, especially at the local level. You really have to get ready every year. So that's the forecast, but please be prepared every season. I did want to talk a little bit about some of the new products and services that the National Hurricane Center is going to be issuing this year. The first of which is we're continuing this experimental cone graphic. So the legacy graphic on the right, this is from Hurricane Helene last year, shows the 5-day forecast. The cone shows where the storms may go, and the colors indicate the coastal watches and warnings. In this case, red showing hurricane warning, blue tropical storm warning. So what we experimented with last year to provide the public really hides the cone and really focuses more on the wind threat when there's any U.S. watches or warnings in place. So on the right, it shows what we issued for Helene experimentally with that red hurricane warning, not just at the coast, but all the way into southern Georgia, as well as in blue, the tropical storm warnings painting all of Florida, as well as southeast Georgia and southwest South Carolina. We're going to continue providing this experimental cone this hurricane season as well. And again, to take the focus off the cone that doesn't really say where the impacts are going to be, and instead really focus more on, for United States watches and warnings, where the threat is going to be. One other change that's going to be helpful is that before systems form but have a high potential for developing, we issue potential tropical cyclone advisories. And so this is an example that we issued last year for potential tropical cyclone 6. And in this case, we have the option now to issue it 3 days before landfall instead of 2 days. And so we're probably going to be issuing a few more of these potential tropical cyclone advisories. And again, it's to allow folks on the coastal areas to be prepared before a storm is actually formed. So again, these advisories are identical to ones for actual tropical depressions, tropical storms, and hurricanes, but it's issued before they form, again, to allow all the suite of products to enhance preparation activities. One new thing that's going to be available this year, and we're excited to be a partner in helping to provide this, is a U.S.-wide rip current risk map. And so this is going to show along coastal areas for the Gulf, for the Atlantic, where there's going to be rip current risk, whether it's none, low, moderate, or high. Because what we've seen is that rip currents and people in the surf account the last 10 years was the third highest cause of fatalities. And so we really want to let people know where the dangerous areas are. It's fun to play in the waves, but you've got to be careful because rip currents can really be dangerous and deadly. Another change, and this is a little more on the technical side, is for our tropical cyclone marine text product. We're now going to start doing day 4 and day 5 size predictions. In the past, we were only doing a size forecast for tropical storms and hurricanes out to day 3. Now that's going to day 4 and day 5. We're also changing our 12-foot seas analysis to a 4-meter seas because the international partners were asking for meters instead of feet. Another new thing that the National Weather Service is we're going to be providing under the leadership of the Weather Prediction Center is a post-storm heat risk map. So after you get a storm making landfall, many times you're without power. And if you have no power and it's a combination with some extreme heat, that's a very dangerous situation. So this is a new product that's going to help highlight that heat risk after a storm goes through. And then last thing to mention is that the cone is going to be a little different this year. It's hard to see the differences, but both the cones on the Atlantic side and the Pacific side are going to be a few percent smaller. And that's because the cone is based on circles that represent the 67th percentile error over the last 5 years. So we update it every year to reflect the improvements, hopefully, that we've seen, and that does make the cone get a little smaller. And then just to wrap up, here are the list of names. We can now cross off Andrea since we just issued the first advisory on that. Fortunately, that's a storm that's not going to threaten the southeast United States or any land areas at this point. I really hope we don't get to Wendy or Van, but please be ready this hurricane season in case one starts coming your way. So I think I'll stop there and see if you all have any questions.
Thank you so much, Chris, for providing that presentation, as well as to David and Pam and Shelby for providing their awesome presentations and information. Right now we have a few moments for questions. Chris, I have a few for you already, but before I ask them, Feel free to, everyone, just so you know, we're going to have the webinar recording and key takeaways will be sent out in the next day or two. The next webinars that we're going to focus on in July, we're going to switch over to drought information, but hopefully we're not transitioning into drought by the time we have our next webinar, but focusing on the drivers of flash drought in the Southeast. And then in August, we're going to be talking about drought conditions, drought condition reporting. And then if you have any questions after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to me at elliot.wickham@noaa.gov. So a quick question, or I guess if we have questions, I see a couple hands going up. Feel free to put them in the chat or the question box rather than hands raised. Chris, I have a few questions. I think they're rolling in for you, at least right now. First is it unusual to see a storm form in June at 36.6 degrees north?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Andrea officially formed then. It has actually been around as a low for about a day and a half or 2 days, and so it's possible that in after the season we might say it had begun a little bit further south. So yes, it is a little rare for that to occur, but whenever you have warm waters and low vertical shear and moisture and a unstable environment, then systems can form. So yeah, it's a little unusual, but having one in June is not unusual.
Perfect. Thank you. And then the next one for you, Chris, is can you differentiate the difference between what's a hurricane versus a tropical storm?
Certainly. So tropical storms start at 39 miles per hour, and hurricanes start at 74 miles per hour. However, we only estimate them to the nearest 5. And so the reality is that a tropical storm starts at 40 miles per hour and a hurricane starts at 75. We never estimate them to the nearest single mile per hour because we ain't that good. And so it's, yeah, so that's the main difference. We also have subtropical storms, which are hybrids, and they also start at 40 miles per hour.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to ask 2 more questions for you, Chris. One is, do you monitor or is there any predictability from the Central American gyre? It has been the genesis for several major hurricanes in recent years. That's the comment.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the Central American gyre is a feature we can see early in the hurricane season, like now, or late in the season in October or November. And what it is, it's a broad cyclonic circulation that sets up over Central America. And when it does, it really pulls in a lot of moisture and causes some huge amounts of rain at times. And of course, massive rain over mountainous areas like much of Central America can cause rain, flash floods and mudslides. What it also can do is provide the formation ingredients for a tropical storm or hurricane. And so we have seen that lead to formation of systems. And if we do have, especially kind of an October situation where a monsoon gyre helps spin up a tropical storm or hurricane in the Western Caribbean, most of those West Caribbean ones head to the north or northeast. And they can often cause impacts in Southeast United States. So it's something that we can forecast with the global models, but it can make it really tricky in knowing where the formation is going to occur, because with a broad cyclonic gyre, it can kind of form almost anywhere within that circulation itself.
Thank you. And then I know we're at the top of the hour, so I'll ask one more, and it's related to some of the products that you showed. I think some of them are still experimental, but those products like the heat risk and the rip current products, are those available yet, or are they still in-house and they're going to be released later? And so if they are available, is there a way that people can get access to those now?
Right. So those will be experimental but available this year. And so there'll be links to them on our website, but
Okay.
only when there's a system that's going to be affecting the United States.
Okay. So they're going to be attached to, when other products go out as well.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone's time for providing the presentations, and also for everyone that tuned in. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, elliot.wickham.noaa.gov. And we hope to see you all at our next webinar in July. And thank you all again so much. Everyone have a good day.